Every business, regardless of its size, must provide its employees with safe working conditions. And considering the range of potential hazards, from asbestos to slippery stairs to excessive noise, that can be difficult for a small business. And why should everyone be so concerned about job safety and health? Because each year, approximately 6,000 employees in this country die from workplace injuries, while another 50,000 die from illnesses caused by exposure to workplace hazards. In addition, 6 million workers suffer non-fatal workplace injuries at an annual cost to U.S. businesses of more than $125 billion. Standards and rules for safe working conditions, tools, equipment, facilities, and processes are set by the Labor Department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA. OSHA standards apply to every private employer with one or more employees, except for those in industries covered by other federal job safety legislation. Today, roughly 93 million employees across the country are protected by state and federal OSHA programs. But even with adequate safety measures, accidents do happen. In this Insider exclusive special, we go behind the headlines in Justice in America, David Parknet's story, to meet with Claudine Cloutier, partner at the Ketch's law firm, to learn how she successfully represented her client and his family in a construction accident case that resulted in a record verdict in excess of $4 million. Claudine has earned a reputation as an unyielding trial lawyer who repeatedly represents individuals and families against big companies and the Goliaths of the world, and repeatedly wins. She has earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best trial lawyers in Massachusetts. She's built a substantial reputation by consistently winning cases other law firms have turned down, and her amazing courtroom skills and headline-grabbing success rate continue to provide her clients with the results they need and the results they deserve. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Boston, Massachusetts. It is my great pleasure to introduce Claudine Cloutier. Welcome to the show, Claudine.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Tell our audience a little bit about your law group, the Ketch's Law Group. What type of law do you practice here?
We do all plaintiffs or employee-based personal injury, workers' compensation, medical malpractice.
Representing a lot of the little people in the world, correct?
We do. Anybody can get hurt, so it runs a spectrum, but given the type of practice that we have, particularly on the workers' compensation side, a lot of the folks that have physically demanding jobs, a lot of construction workers, those kinds of folks tend to be the ones that have major work injuries, and so we represent those folks, and some of those have personal injury cases or negligence-based cases in addition to the workers' compensation case. And then we also do, car accidents of any kind, products liability, wrongful death claims, slip and falls. It can be something that is fairly routine to catastrophic, complex injuries.
Right. There are many types of law a lawyer can go into. Why did you decide to practice this type of law?
Started working at this law firm when I was in law school, and I really didn't know what area I wanted to go into. And the more I practiced this, or the more I saw it practiced as a law clerk then, the more I really enjoyed, and I found a sense of purpose in the difference you can make in someone's life who comes to you having suffered a terrible incident. And it was a nice sort of combination of the problem-solving analytical aspects that you think about when you think about going to law school, but then a real human side as to how to get folks the best result possible in light of usually some pretty terrible circumstances. And so in that regard, I was drawn to it, and I thought it was a nice combination for me.
Who is David Parknet?
David Parknet is a wonderful sort of gentle giant of a guy who was working for the town of Mashpee, and he got severely injured back in February of 2014 trying to do some drywall work when a makeshift scaffold that he was standing on collapsed.
He fell down some stairs, didn't he?
There was essentially, picture like a scaffold plank that's run from the top stair of a stairway and then extending out above the descending stairs and resting on essentially a 2x4 that was drilled into the wall or the header above the bottom of the stairway. That's what he was working off of in order to try to do the drywalling work along the sides of the stairway.
No, he hadn't put that up himself. It was put up by the previous workers, right?
That's right. The previous workers who had done some of the insulating work in that area had put up the 2x4, or what we referred to as a cleat, on the header of the stairway. So when David and his work partner came along, they put the plank back on the staging the same way the previous company had used it. But when David's work brought him out farther toward the cleat, farther above the stairway and closer to the cleat, unbeknownst to David, had been put into the wall with nails that were just too short to bite into the wood and to support anybody's weight on that end of the scaffold. So when he got out to that area, which is at that point the highest point over the stairways, because now he's over the bottom of the stairs as opposed to the top of the stairs, the cleat pulled out of the wall and he fell down into the stairwell.
What happened to him?
He got a badly injured ankle, severely fractured, comminuted fracture. He had a couple cracked bones in his neck. He had aggravated some pre-existing conditions in his wrists. He had a concussion. He had nasal fractures that required some surgery. He was in really rough shape. He was inpatient in the hospital for a while and underwent, I think he spent approximately 3 years in a boot. So he was immobilized for a good part of that time and had multiple surgeries. And over that whole course, his wife Shelley was caring for him and trying to take on all the things that he normally would have done around the house and the yard while she was still trying to work full time. So this family just went through a really difficult time, and he'll live with the residual effects of his injuries forever.
I understand his medical bills were something like $400,000.
They were.
So by the way, how did he end up with your law firm and you?
I don't know how he first got me, but he was represented by us through his workers' compensation claim. And his case came to me to handle what we call the third-party negligence claim. And we filed suit against the insulating company that had put up the cleat without using the properly sized nails and had left it without sort of warning anybody as to what they had done, so that when the next contractor came along, it looked like it was safe to use. And so we filed suit against them, and that case went to trial, and we got a great result at verdict.
I think you got $4 million, right?
We got a $4 million verdict, which I understand was one of the best verdicts out of Barnstable County in Massachusetts that they've ever had. So that's a tremendous result. But we know that there's a big gap between what makes the headlines sometimes and what really happens in terms of plaintiffs that have these severe injuries. Because often there's just not either the assets or the insurance coverage to fully compensate people for these injuries. One of the hardest things that I have to do as a lawyer representing people who are injured is to explain to people sometimes that there's just not money out there that's going to compensate you for your damages. I've represented quadriplegics, paraplegics, wrongful death claims when somebody's had $20,000 of insurance coverage and no assets to go after. And other than going on to governmental benefits for welfare, essentially, there's no pot of cash out there that's going to compensate you. And I think one of the things that the public isn't aware of when they read these headlines about these very successful verdicts is that often bears no relation to what money the injured people actually receive.
I think with a $4 million verdict, it was eventually reduced to $2.5 million because of
comparative negligence.
Yeah, and but the insurance company that was representing the defendant, they had a maximum policy of what, $1 million or something like that.
They did.
So yeah, that's a very good point that you bring up. Just because you see a headline, doesn't mean that you're going to collect everything, right?
Right.
What were some of the challenges in this case?
There were multiple, as with any construction site case. The circumstances are dynamic, right? The the scene changes almost immediately. By the very nature of construction, things are continuing to change and evolve. And so trying to get as much information as you can early on is always key. What's changed a lot for me over the course of my career is that, when I started, if you had one picture of the accident scene, it was a tremendous, tremendous source of information. Now, just about everybody is carrying around a camera by virtue of carrying their cell phone. And so, luckily, that's been a great benefit for us, particularly on construction site incidents when, the folks that may have been present at the time of the incident, this was not the worst day of their life like it was for your client, so they may not remember the exact circumstances of what happened, but if you have that photo to sort of freeze that moment in time, it helps refresh everyone's memory. If you can put that up in front of a jury and really paint the scene for them, that can be tremendously helpful, and that's true with every construction site case. For this one in particular, just the sheer severity of his injuries, and how we were going to get him properly compensated. What a lot of folks don't know also is that when you receive workers' compensation benefits in Massachusetts, as in most states, the workers' compensation insurer has an automatic lien or an automatic right of recovery against anything you get in the negligence claim. And so making sure that worked out in the best way possible for our client was a challenge. And also, the defendants were arguing that Mr. Pocknett should have checked the cleat or should have done something different. So they obviously were arguing to make a case that Mr. Pocknett was comparatively negligent in contributing to the injury.
Percentage of contributory negligence was determined, or was a percentage determined?
I think it ended up being 41%.
I would like you to explain a little bit about, the lien that the Commonwealth places against this. This means all the money that was paid out, or do you negotiate that with them?
We can negotiate with that with them. Massachusetts, in terms of how the workers' compensation lien works in Massachusetts, there are some case law here that's beneficial to us. One is that if there's money allocated to pain and suffering, because workers' compensation doesn't pay you for pain and suffering, that is not subject to the lien. There's also case law that the spouse, in terms of their loss of consortium claim, that is not subject to the workers' compensation lien. So that's helpful to us as well. But things that are not so helpful, for example, is that this is a modified comparative negligence case, so that so long as the worker or the plaintiff is 50% or less, they can still recover, but their verdict is reduced by the percentage of negligence that's attributed to them. So in this case, for example, if the jury finds them 40% at fault, the verdict is going to be reduced by 40%, but the lien is not correspondingly reduced. And so it's kind of a little bit of a strange scenario, whereas if we lose outright, the workers' compensation lien holder gets nothing back, just like we get nothing back. But if we get a reduced verdict because of comparative negligence, the lien is not reduced. So that's a little bit odd. There are some another sort of advantage for workers' compensation liens as opposed to health insurance liens is that at least the workers' compensation insurer in Massachusetts has to pay their proportional share of legal fees and expenses, and that can be helpful as well. So there's parts of the law that I think are very fair, and there's other parts that don't work out quite so fairly.
Today we are fortunate to have David Parknet on the show, so let's bring him on right now. It is my great pleasure to introduce David Pocknett to the show. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you for having me.
Take us back to the incident, your accident. What was going through your mind when you fell from the scaffold? Would you fall about 10 feet or something like that?
Correct.
What happened?
Into a stairwell. I fell into a stairwell, and I don't know. When I woke up, the guy that was with me woke me up. He gave me something to put over my face because I was bleeding under my nose, and called 911.
And what were the injuries you suffered, by the way?
I had a broken ankle, just now been fused. My knees were already bad anyhow, but my knees were re-injured. I had a fractured vertebrae in my neck. I think about the third one, if I remember correctly. My wrist, because of the fall, I guess I tried to break my fall. And pretty much I got busted up.
Now, you were in medical treatment for what, about, was it 3 years? 3 years?
At least 3 years. I mean, I'm still under workman's comp.
What were your feelings? Because you obviously took great pride in your work. You worked. And all of a sudden you can't work anymore. What did that make you feel like?
Well, of course, if my wife is the only one going to work, and when I used to go to work, I'd go to work, I'd be home at 2 o'clock, 2:30, and I would do yard work. I would do the cooking, because I still do the cooking now, but at that point I couldn't do it. I had to have my buddy come over and give me lunch, and my wife would make it. I had a refrigerator in the room, so I'm not really doing anything, you know what I mean? So I used to, anxiety, you know what I mean? You can, you know, I still have anxieties going to hospital or whatever else. This is why they put me on so much different things to calm me down, because I'm very high strung.
What do you do with your time these days?
Whatever I can. I mean,
Outside.
outside work, as far as in my yard. Yeah, and then every few hours I have to go rest. By 1 o'clock I have to go put my legs up because they just hurt so much.
Even now?
Well, of course, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, right. And so I do that, and whatever projects that I have to finish or whatever else, I'm trying to do those. I'd like to go fishing again. I'd like to go to the track again.
You know, you've been through hell and back with these injuries, and you've been through the legal system. What do you think about the legal system?
The legal system, it works, but there's people worse off than I am. So there's no way I'm going to whine about my injuries compared to some people that defended our country that are in worse shape than I am. So I'm lucky to be alive. I'm lucky to be still walking. I'm lucky to be able to do some of the things I did before. As far as the legal system, it's very complicated. Okay, when you gotta fill out these forms that to say what happened, and you gotta do all this stuff. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so when I wrote out all my, whatever the document was, whatever I wrote out, even the lawyers said, well, that's too much information. Well, I don't know what to write. I wrote down everything that has equated with the accident.
You're on national TV right now. What do you have to say to anyone, advice to give to them in terms of when you're injured, what you should do?
The first thing is, and I didn't do it the first thing because I didn't know how the system worked, and I went on for 2 years without a year without an attorney. And but I think you should go and get an attorney. Not that I'm saying everybody should sue, because everybody wants to sue for things. But if it's a legitimate suit, and legitimately you've lost your ability to do what you've been doing, I think you should go and seek out help from the law system. I mean, from the legal system.
Right. How did you end up at Claudine's firm and with Claudine?
A friend of mine that belongs to the Wampanoag Hunting and Fishing Club asked me, said, Dave, do you have an attorney? This was like a year later. And because my job, he sent me a letter saying if I get hurt again, that I would be terminated or whatever else. So that was pretty lousy. So I explained it to him, and he said for me to call Joe Aganelli Jr., who had previously worked for this firm, Catcher's Law Group. Now he has his own firm, but he was the one, and he come out and to my house and directed me. And after that, he said, I think you need to talk to somebody else other than myself, because I just do workman's comp. But I think there's something more going on here, so I think maybe you should have a conference with one of his associates.
What has been your opinion of the way Claudine handled your case?
She's been good, very good. I mean, she's let me know what goes on right along, and I'm a pain in the butt. You know what I mean? But she deals with it.
You're happy with the result here?
If you want to talk about 10 cents on the dollar, I guess so, because that's what ends up happening. Because everybody in my tribe thinks that I'm a millionaire.
Because you got a $4 million verdict.
Exactly.
They read the headline.
That's right.
They don't know the details.
They don't know the details, and I keep telling them that's fake news. And what they think is that I am full of money that is coming out everywhere in my pockets. So of course everybody asks, comes with and I donate a lot of money, but I don't have any money. I mean, I got, like I said, 10 cents on the dollar, you figure it out. I got $256,000. That's all out of $4 million.
Well, what do you have to say about the making people more responsible for, this $4 million verdict or eventually a $2.5 million verdict? They should be held responsible, correct? That's what the jury decided, right?
I agree, but then again, if the insurance company says no, the person doesn't have the wherewithal to keep giving you whatever they have to make it right, where do you go?
That is a problem, but I want to thank you very much for being on the show, and best to you.
Thank you for having me.
So, Claudine, there's a lot of people that get injured on construction sites. One of the great things about the state of New York is when you're talking about compensation, if you get injured on the job, if your subcontractor doesn't have the money or doesn't have insurance to cover it, the general contractor is always responsible. And they've been trying to change that law forever in New York, but that's where the money is, right? In your state or other states that you practice, what are your rights if you are injured on the job?
First we usually look at workers' compensation rights because that's kind of your meat and potatoes. That's the kind of coverage that will give you a weekly benefit and help you buy groceries and continue to live while you're trying to recover for the injury. So usually that is the first priority for somebody that's injured on the job.
So under the current workers' comp laws in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, what percentage approximately does a injured party receive if he's found eligible for workers' comp?
Usually it's 60%, unless you get onto permanent and total disability benefits, which is rare. People usually claim 60% of or they are able to get 60% of their wage. Now, since that's not subject to tax, that doesn't sound so bad, but people run into a lot of problems. For example, if they've just gotten a raise, because that 6% is generally calculated from your 52-week average before you were injured. The other problem that people run into is that if their health insurance benefits, for example, are connected to their employment, if they can't get back to work, they might lose their health insurance benefits, and now they have a lot of added expenses to try to pay for some form of health insurance while they're trying to recover from this injury.
I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.